Namaste everyone, I'm your co-host Shawnee ma'am. Welcome to your favorite learning channel. The topic for today's video is types of organisms. So what we already know is that all the living organisms have a common factor, and the common factor is that all of them are composed of or made up of the basic unit of life called cell. Now what happens is that the millions of living organisms, they differ in their number, size and shape of the cells. So the cells are present in all the living organisms, but the number, size and shape of the cells would differ from organism to organisms. Okay, so based on the number of cells present in living organisms, there are two different types of organisms that we would be studying in our first part of the video, and then we would also look at different shapes and sizes of cells. Okay, so to begin with, the types of organisms. So based on the number of cells present in these organisms, there are two types of organisms. One is unicellular organisms, and the second category is of multicellular organisms. So what are unicellular organisms? So unicellular organisms are the organisms made up of a single cell. These are the organisms that are made up of a single cell. Okay, so these organisms consist of only a single cell, and this cell performs all the activities, all the essential activities, we can call them, all the essential activities of life. Okay, so such organisms are called unicellular organisms. Okay, so the single cell here performs all the necessary functions of living organisms. For example, so the example of unicellular organisms would be amoeba, then euglena, then blue-green algae, etc. So these are few of the organisms that are unicellular, which means they have only a single cell, and this single cell performs all the essential activities of life. Okay, so this was about the unicellular organisms. Now moving on, let's understand what are multicellular organisms. So when the number of cells in an organism consists of more than one cell, so these organisms, multicellular organisms are those organisms which are made up of more than one cell. Okay, so such organisms are called as multicellular organisms. Okay, so in other words, we can define multicellular organisms as the organisms made up of more than one cell or having numerous cells. Okay, so it includes several well-developed organisms. So for example of multicellular organisms are some of the well-developed organisms like lion, human beings, even plants, etc. Okay, so these are few of the examples of multicellular organisms. So what happens here? The life in multicellular organisms begin from a single cell. So this cell gets fertilized and it further multiplies repeatedly to increase the number of cells. For example, the yellow yolk in hen's egg is a single cell. Similarly, the embryo formed by the fertilization of male and female gametes in human beings is also a single cell, but later on it undergoes multiplication to produce an entire organism. Okay, so this is what happens in multicellular organism. That is, after fertilization of male and female gametes, as we took an example here in human beings, after fertilization of male and female gametes, the zygote is a single cell which later on multiplies and develops into an entire organism consisting of multiple cells. Okay. So now let's understand how can we differentiate the unicellular organisms from the multicellular organisms. Okay. We would first consider the characteristic, and the characteristic would be the lifespan. So let's first see how can we differentiate unicellular organisms from multicellular organisms based on the lifespan. So the lifespan of unicellular organisms is usually short, whereas in case of multicellular organisms they have a longer lifespan. Then the second difference would be based on the reproduction. So what happens here? In unicellular organisms, reproduction is performed by or is done by a single cell, whereas in case of multicellular organisms, only germ cells, only the germ cells are involved in the process of reproduction. Okay. Then the third difference would be on the basis of division of labor. Okay. So in case of unicellular organisms, the division of labor is absent because there is only a single cell and that single cell is performing all the essential functions required for existence. Okay. Whereas in case of multicellular organisms, division of labor is present because as there are multiple cells, different types of cells are specialized in performing different types of functions. Alright. Then the next difference would be based on the activities. Okay. So here a single cell performs all the activities in case of unicellular organisms, whereas in case of multicellular organisms there are different cells that perform different activities. Okay. Then after that, the last point of differentiation would be based on the factor of representation. Okay. So in unicellular organisms it is represented by only a single cell. Whereas in case of multicellular organisms, it it consists of a large number of cells. Okay, so these are few of the differences between the unicellular organisms and the multicellular organisms. Now that we have learnt about unicellular and multicellular organisms, so now let's understand the different cell size of different organisms. So we would now discuss about the various cell size. So the cell size of organisms varies from being very small like bacteria to very large like the eggs of ostrich. Okay, so though most of the cells may be microscopic, that is they are very small and can be only visualized under a microscope, a few cells are also macroscopic. So the cells that is the smallest is of mycoplasma. So the mycoplasma, laid-lavi has a diameter which is about 0.1 to 0.15 micron, and these cells are considered to be the smallest of cells. They are the smallest cells, that is the cells of mycoplasma are the smallest cells. Now which is the largest cell then? There is ostrich eggs. So these cells, the egg cells of ostrich, are considered to be the largest animal cells that measures about 170 cross 135 mm in diameter, and hence they are considered as the largest animal cells. Now the smallest cell is a bacterium, which is about the smallest cell is a bacterium which is about 0.1 micron in size. Okay, so then the size of the cell is controlled by the metabolic requirements. So as the cell increases in size, the volume increases geometrically, while the surface area increases arithmetically. Okay, so as the cell increases, as the size of cell increases, what happens then? The volume increases, geometrically, whereas when the cell size is increasing, the surface area increases. How does it increase? It increases arithmetically. Okay. Then there is another organism, acetabularia. There is acetabularia, which is a single-celled algae. It is a single-celled algae. celled algae which is 10 centimeter in length. It is 10 centimeters in length. Then in plants like jute and hemp, fibers are a few centimeters long. The human female ovum if we talk about, then it has a diameter of 0.1 mm. Okay, this is the diameter of human female ovum. So a small cell possesses larger surface area. This larger surface area ensures greater diffusion of nutrients and respiratory gases into the cell. Okay. So after the size of cell, now let's talk about the cell shape. Cell shape. So even the shape of cells vary in different organisms. So let's see what are the various cell shapes. So cells show great variation in their shapes. The size and shape of cells vary in relation to the specific functions, but however, most of the cells possess definite shape. Some cells continuously change their shapes. So there are some cells that continuously change their shape, whereas there are some other cells which have a constant shape. They have a constant shape through their existence. So some cells may be oval-like. For example, different types of shapes we would be considering now. So oval-shaped cells, for example, the red blood cells are oval-shaped cells. Then some cells could be branched-like, for example, osteocytes. Then cuboidal shaped cells are present. For example, cuboidal like cells, for example, the germ cells are cuboidal cells. Then there are elongated cells. For example, nerve cells. Nerve cells are elongated. Then there are spindle-shaped cells. For example, muscle cells. Muscle cells are spindle-shaped cells. So some cells may even be irregular in shape, as in some cells could be irregular in shape, as in amoeba. Also, the leukocytes are irregular shaped cells. Okay. So now let's quickly revise everything that we have covered today. So we today talked about the types of organisms. So now we know that the organisms are of two types based on the number of cells that are present in them. One is the unicellular organisms and the other is the multicellular organisms. So unicellular organisms are those which are made up of only a single cell, and this single cell performs all the essential activities of life. For example, amoeba, euglena, blue-green algae, these are the examples of unicellular organisms. The multicellular organisms are those organisms that are made up of more than one cell, and here different cells are responsible for carrying out different functions of the body. For example, lion, human beings, plants, etc. are the examples of multicellular organisms. Okay. Then we talked about the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms. So the first parameter or characteristic that we considered was lifespan, and we saw that the lifespan is short in case of unicellular organisms, whereas it is long in case of multicellular organisms. Then, considering reproduction, in unicellular organisms it is performed or done by a single cell, whereas in multicellular organisms only germ cells are involved or are responsible for reproduction. Then if we talk about the division of labor, then this division of labor is absent in unicellular organisms, whereas it is present in multicellular organisms. Then we talked about the activities. So in unicellular organisms, the single cell performs all the essential activities of life, whereas in case of multicellular organisms, different cells perform different activities. Okay. Then if we consider the representation, then in unicellular organisms, it is represented by a single cell, whereas in multicellular organism it consists of large number of cells. Okay. Then after that, we know that all the living organisms have cells, and they are only divided based on the number of cells the organisms have. But the size and shape of the cells do differ in organisms. Okay, the number, size and shape of the cells will always differ in organisms. However, the common factor is that all the living organisms would always have this basic unit called cell. So coming to the cell size, we know that the size of the cells in living organisms varies from small cell, that is from bacterial cells, to very large cells like the ostrich cell. Now the smallest cell is mycoplasma cells, that is the mycoplasma laidlawi cells have a diameter of 0.1 to 0.15 micron, and these are considered as the smallest cells. Then there are ostrich eggs that are considered as the largest animal cells, which range about 170 cross 135 mm in diameter. Then the smallest cells could be of bacterium, which has a size of 0.1 micron. Then as the size of the cell increases, what happens? Their volume also increases, but the volume increases geometrically, whereas with the increase in size of the cell, their surface area increases arithmetically. Okay. Then there are some other cells like acetabularia, which is a single-celled algae. It has 10 centimeters in length. Then the human female ovum has 0.1 mm, it is 0.1 mm in diameter. Then the cell shape also varies in different organisms. So there is a great variation in the cell shapes as well. The size and shape of cells vary in relation to the specific functions. However, most of the cells possess definite shape. Some cells, what happen? They continuously change shape, whereas there are some other cells that remain, or they always have a constant shape throughout their existence. So we have seen various examples of different cell shapes here. So red blood cells have oval shape, they are oval shaped. Then branch-like cells are osteocytes, cuboidal cells are germ cells, then nerve cells are elongated shape, then muscle cells have spindle shape, and there are some cells that have an irregular shape, such as in case of amoeba, the shape of amoeba is irregular, whereas the leukocytes also have an irregular shape. So these are the examples of various cell shapes in the living world. Okay, so I hope you all would have got some great insights by watching today's video. Please do not forget to like and share the video. Till then, thank you for watching.